It's time for a reality check.
We're here to deconstruct health and fitness trends and provide tangible advice so you can become 1% better with each choice starting today.
Welcome back to Reality Check. We are your hosts, Jess and Jill, and today we want to talk about what true root cause health actually means. I think that the current landscape root cause terminology is almost like a buzzword these days, and I think that lines are blurred when it comes to functional health and conventional care and medicine and living a healthy lifestyle, right? All of these things, that language is getting a little bit watered down, and people have symptoms and nobody wants to feel not good, right? So people are like, how can I get relief from these symptoms? And that's not a hard thing to do, right? People go to the doctor for high blood pressure and they get put on a beta blocker, right? Because they don't want high blood pressure. You go to functional and you have gut dysbiosis and you get a supplement protocol to get relief from your constant bloating, right? So like we can treat symptoms to get relief in our life. And oftentimes, or in a lot of cases, sometimes you need symptom relief to be able to improve your quality of life to then execute the long-term solution, right? Like that is the beauty of medicine. But true root cause health isn't just treating symptoms and addressing symptoms. And a lot of times it's presented as very fragmented care where it's just a partial solution. And not to throw shade at the industry that I am actively in and pursuing, but the problem with functional is that it's a lot of symptom treating, and you have these professionals who do look at optimal lab values versus general conventional medicine values and ranges. And they do come up with really great targeted gut protocols for the symptoms that you're having in the way that labs are presented. But there has to be a correlation with the lab markers and the data that we pull for you with the symptoms that you're actually experiencing. But the most important part that is significantly overlooked is what is the environment or the behaviors or the inputs that have actually driven your body to this point of dysfunction, right? So we have to understand the physiological pattern that your body has adapted to, identify what is driving that pattern and causing you to have to live with it, right? You have to maintain it. And then we have to change the internal environment and the external environment in a way that you can maintain for the long run, right? You can understand what habits and behaviors or changes in your life, whatever, that aren't acceptable so that you don't end up back in the same cycle over and over again. We work with a lot of women who've spent a lot of money on protocols and they're like, yeah, I think I felt better at one point, but I still feel stuck, or like I still can't lose weight, or whatever the case is. So root cause is just, I think, becoming an overused phrase in health. And we really want to make sure that individuals, not just women, understand that finding one hidden thing is the problem, right? That is my thyroid is off, my hormones are imbalanced, my cortisol is high. None of that matters because we have to go deeper than that. And we have to look at the full picture so that your body isn't in a reactive state anymore, and that we fix the environment that it's in so that we're not continuing to drive these dysfunctional patterns and throwing Band-Aid solutions at it, right? Because that's not going to help you in the long run.
Well, and I feel like a lot of people feel good and validated, which makes sense. And again, we run labs for people for this reason also, like to be able to show, yes, there is something off. We see patterns. The way you're feeling is not in your head, right? But it's almost like as soon as a doctor tells somebody, oh, actually you have Hashimoto's, they're like, oh, okay, then that explains all of my weight loss resistance. And now it is what it is. I have this thing. And it's like, well, wait. What can we do to actually support your thyroid conversion? What can we do to actually, like, we can reverse engineer this behaviorally, but a lot of times those behavioral things still go back to the most important things that we talk about all the time in all of our episodes, right? But it's like, yeah, people are like, oh, okay, that's the thing. So now I just need thyroid medicine and that'll fix all my problems. And it's like, well, no, because you're still living in that same environment that created the thyroid issue to begin with.
100%.
So, and I'm using the thyroid example, but this goes for everything across the board, right?
Definitely one of the most common ones we see.
I have like higher insulin. My insulin was climbing for a few years in a row, and I'm now bringing it back down every year on my physical. However, okay, a common approach for that is, oh, well, cut, like again, I hear this all the time from people's doctors, and I'm like, cut carbs or do this or do that.
Sugar.
Okay, well, that's if somebody's problem was because they were eating way too much sugar and they weren't getting protein and this and that, great. Mine wasn't because of that. Mine was because of stress and lack of sleep, right? So, and again, it's not one single root cause. Stress and lack of sleep are one dial that I can turn in my body's stress system. There's also lots of other dials that we can turn, right? So, we're not necessarily looking for one single root cause necessarily either. There might be several things or layers of things that you can change in your life that will over time shift all of these things more towards healthy, optimal directions.
Yeah. And that's really where we wanted to kick off going into this is that misconception that root cause means finding one culprit, one problem, because it's never the case, right? So we have to understand the pattern under the symptoms, what environment created that pattern, what is keeping it going, and what has to be adopted or changed or embodied consistently for the underlying physiology to change so that you feel better inside and out. So people want, to Jess's point, data and validation, which is why labs are a beautiful thing, right? And not only now with functional, we get the data, we get all different angles to look at everything. We can go through the order of operations, which we'll talk about, but ultimately we have to look at the data and then say, okay, what do we need to implement or change? Because the data is just step one, right? Step zero, realistically. Everyone wants it to be the thyroid, the gut, the cortisol, the lower stress, the mold, the insulin, the parasites, whatever it is, right? There are certainly levers that you can pull that are much more, carry more weight or are more influential on the change than others. You know, Jess mentioned the sleep, the, dietary changes with elevated glucose and insulin and insulin resistance, is a great example that somebody can be developing that for 10 years, right? Before they become diabetic or pre-diabetic. 10 years of their body working to lower glucose based on the habits and the inputs and the nutrition. And now we're like, I have insulin resistance. Well, yeah, that didn't just happen overnight, right? That was your body finally waving the white flag and saying, girl, I can't fight this fight for you anymore. Like, I'm tired, right? And now you see insulin go up on labs and everyone's like, when did this happen? And it's like, well, what have you been doing for the last 5 to 10 years? Yeah.
And a lot of times, like I've seen cases where women have worked with us in the past and we're doing the basics first. We always spend our first 6 months doing the basics. And part of that is building muscle. Guess what? Muscle processes glucose. It lowers your insulin, it improves your insulin sensitivity. And then they'll go to the doctor and be like, oh, I found out the thing. It's because I'm insulin resistant. I'm like, yeah, that's why we had you lifting. But we're not explaining to you on the back end that this is going to have a trickle down to every single, because we're zooming out and we're looking big picture system. We're not deloading to you on every single trend that we're doing. We're saying, hey, here's your most important thing, client, this week to focus on. Let's give you 2 things. And over the course of 6 months, over the course of a year, we see these labs improve. They come back and they tell us how good they feel and all of their symptoms are going away and all this stuff. But again, it's like in the moment, they're thinking, no, this isn't what I need to do. I need to address this. And it's like, we are addressing this. We are addressing the insulin sensitivity thing by doing strength training 3 times a week, right?
Yes.
Again, I just say that because I do think that there's this commonality of, oh, no. I need to work with somebody who's going to just tell me what my problem is. And it's like, okay, but that's not like actually behavior change to fix the problem.
Yes. Yeah. And, by the time that a lab reads abnormal or that symptoms are significant enough to interfere with your quality of life, there is usually a lot of compensation that has already happened by the body to get to this point where it's like, whew, I can't keep up, right? And again, it's not, oh, I have high cortisol, I'm really stressed, or I went through a stressful period of life. That is like, it could be poor nutrient quality. It could be low calorie intake. It can be gut dysbiosis that's been lingering for a long time. It can be, I've been constipated since I'm a child and you have a lot of inflammation and your body is working against it, right? So we have the endocrine system and all of these different systems, but they all work together, right? So symptom or a diagnosis are not the root cause. I have people say, oh, this lab marker is elevated. What do I do? And it's like, nothing. You can't do anything about one lab marker, right? None of those things are your root cause. The body is adapting to all of these stressors over time that have built up, and now it's presenting in different ways for people, right? So we have to understand, again, What pattern is the body stuck in? How do we get here? What are you trying when you say nothing works for me? And then what do we do next? So we have to look upstream, right? We've got like hormones, I always say, are the check engine light. You might have heard that phrase before. That's just saying, hey, something's off, something's up. Hormone, we're not going to immediately go in and say, okay, we have to look at your progesterone, we have to look at your testosterone, we have to look at your cycle and your PMS. No, we have to look at deeper. We have to look at gut and liver, which I always say that's where we start, but that's still not your root problem. Your root problem is always going to be something in your lifestyle that drove you to that point. Now we open the body up and we support the body to be more effective in the efforts that we're implementing.
The doing that it does, right?
Yeah.
Like me and Jill used to say this all the time, like detoxes aren't a thing. And that's because they're piss poorly marketed, and it's like juice cleanses that people are selling. Just like they're not actually effective. And we would always say, well, your liver is the thing that does your detox. Yeah, but your liver can actually become sluggish and less effective if it continues to be an overly taxed system. So if we can clean that up, your body can start operating the way it originally did and how it was supposed to, right? Versus it kind of being slower and slower in healing itself. So some of this trickle down effects that Jill's talking about, of first we tend to work on, let's get the liver to be a little bit more efficient, or let's detox the liver a little bit. Let's give support to that process for phase 1 and phase 2 liver detox. Then second, okay, how's the gut looking, right? That's a trickle down, not only of what we eat. Sure, I picked up a food poisoning once, right? Like I did this or that, these random things, but also chronic stress significantly impacts your gut microbiome and your gut lining and your ability to absorb different nutrients, right? Okay, if we can heal those two things or work on making them more effective, naturally our sex hormones start to regulate better because we're absorbing nutrients. There's all of these things are connected. And I think a lot of times women are like, no, my progesterone was whatever on my lab, so I just need you to give me something for my hormones. And it's like, yeah, we're doing this stuff because there ought to be a trickle down, and it's going to take time, but eventually your body will start producing the progesterone the way it was supposed to a little bit more, right? Or the estrogen progesterone balance. And we kind of work our way down that stream.
Yeah. So symptoms, like I said, are signals, right? They are the outward expression of the body to say something is going on internally, right? So what's driving the pattern? What's maintaining the pattern? We have to say it's not what supplement do I take to get symptom relief? Although sometimes that's the case temporarily, like I said, but we don't just want symptom relief. We want to change the environment that keeps recreating that symptom, right? So we have to
supplements,
look at the whole environment, externally and internally.
I always want to be really clear on this because I think we a lot of times talk about how there are people there's functional health providers who are like, here's thousands of dollars of supplements, go do it. And then the people are like, yeah, I feel better. And then 6 months from now, they feel shitty again because they didn't also change the other stuff. We are not against those supplements. They can absolutely be helpful. We can add in killers that kill, like, quote unquote, bad gut overgrowth. So we can add in specific nutrients or specific probiotics that the gut was lacking in. We can add in things that help with phase 2 liver detox and kind of packaging out the stuff, getting your liver and your gallbladder to pump out more of the toxic stuff. We can add in those supplements too. We are not against that. We just also want to encourage that you're super nourishing. You're adding tons of fruits and veggies. You're lifting weights. You're getting plenty of sleep and recovery on top of it so that when you're done those protocols, your body actually maintains the results versus just getting the healthier test and then going back to how you were living before and you're in the same position in 6 months or a year. It's kind of similar to like quick weight loss, right? So
we want to talk to you about when we're looking at this and we run labs. You know, a lot of times women will say, oh, I've had labs done and it's normal, right? Everything came back normal. So there is certainly a difference between conventional and functional medicine ranges, right? Either based on gen pop or based on what is actually optimal for this human. Not to mention what's optimal at the end of the day. Sure, there are ranges that we've seen are optimal for people in function, but we have to look at your symptoms too. So again, we can't do one panel, one marker, one supplement, one symptom. We have to look at full diet history, symptom history, training demands, right? Stress. Did you have major stressors in your life that come up that you had to navigate at some point that maybe were pivotal, right? In how things shifted, your digestion, your food quality, your regularity, your cycle, your hormones, just the pace of your life and your lifestyle in general. So that's like, we have to get that full picture. And we like to go through an initial audit period with people who come in, because what they self-report, it's not that I think you're lying or that I don't believe you. I think that even mentally, you have normalized a lot of things or adapted to things over time that you think this behavior is healthy because it's the healthiest behavior you can have in your circumstances, which is fine. That's what we're here to change. So that's why we like to see it in real time. We go through check-ins, we give lighter feedback and recommendations on the front end. And sometimes people are like, hey, what are we doing here? And it's like, no, I need to see just how you live your life and what does a crazy Tuesday look like? And when you say you're not that social, what does that actually mean on a weekend for you? I've had somebody report that and they reported 7 drinks on Saturday and Sunday. And I'm like, whoa, my version of not that social is way different than yours, right? Which is fine. But we have to actually understand what that means to you and then correlate it with everything along the way.
And some of it is behavior change of
Yes.
like, if you've never eaten a fruit or vegetable in your life before, we're starting with the basics, because I'm not going to give you a super intensive protocol that is an anti-inflammatory diet when you don't even eat 1 vegetable a day right now. Like, there's a component of, okay, if you're not going to stick to it and you're only seeing this as I can do anything for 30 days and then I'm going to go back to the shitty way I was eating before or not moving my body before, you're not going to maintain the results again. So a lot of what we do might seem like, oh, come on, I want more. But we're doing it absolutely for a very strategic reason.
Yeah. And then when we look at that and when we go through the audit and look at somebody's symptoms in their labs, now we have this full big picture, right? And now we can say, what levers do we need to pull first, right? We need to make sure that you get immediate relief from whatever is, like, if something is debilitating and genuinely affecting your quality of life right now. So sometimes that's where we say, all right, here's a supplement or here's a thing, right? Just to take the edge off there. But now the sequence and the order that we go in is really important, because we can't look at thyroid and say, let's add a thyroid supplement to regulate, because Jess mentioned this earlier. Do you have congestion? Do we need to open up your detox pathways and your body just isn't converting effectively? If you have inflammation in your gut and you're like, oh I have estrogen dominance. Why do you have estrogen dominance? Is it because that your body is recirculating estrogen and it's not clearing it effectively? So it's not actually high, right? So we have a different problem.
Iron is another really, really common one, where as soon as women see that there's low iron, they immediately go get iron infusions. And then we look at their whole blood panel and we look at patterns and we say, hey, you're likely deficient in these other things too, because there's something going on with your gut absorption. So if we just throw iron into that system and you're not absorbing it, now you have more toxic stuff essentially that you need to clear because you're not absorbing it and utilizing it how you ought to, right? So we can actually do more harm than good by just throwing supplements without a specific reason for each supplement, right?
Yeah. So when people say I've tried everything, it's because they feel very informed, right? They're like, logically, I understand the deeper purpose of all of this. And they even are like, I've had a GI map, I've had a functional blood panel, right? And they're like, I know X, Y, and Z is off. But if you don't address it in the right order, then you might have only gotten temporary relief. And then you're frustrated and you're like, this isn't working, right? Or whatever the case is. Not to mention nutrition and metabolic, I guess I should say metabolic health in the context of actual nutrition and calorie consumption, because metabolic health is a very large term, but a lot of practitioners don't understand how to manipulate nutrition and calorie intake in somebody's life, right? Because somebody could say, I undereat. Maybe you do eat 1,200 calories, but that 4,000 calorie injection YOLO Saturday because you're pissed you didn't see results on the scale this week based on your dieting efforts, there's a physiological component to that needs to be addressed metabolically, but there is a major ongoing behavioral and psychological component that most practitioners will give you a protocol, charge you a shit ton of money for supplements and say, see you in 6 weeks, 8 weeks, 12 weeks, and you are left to fill in those gaps, which is why I don't do random lab ordering. People are like, can you just order me a GI map? Absolutely not, because what are you going to do with that information? You have to implement it from a protocol standpoint, but behaviorally, whatever is driving the dysfunction, you're going to pay all this money for, like, it would not be good. It wouldn't feel good to me ethically or morally to do that for you, which is why I refuse to do it.
Also, I think a lot of practitioners who are only looking at labs and not looking at lifestyle don't understand some of these dials that we're talking about that we can turn to turn stress down and to turn recovery up. So Jill just talked about under fueling. I have heard doctors and nurse practitioners who are very well intentioned and functional providers say, well, if you just lose some weight, then these other numbers will be healthier. A lot of times paired with here's a GLP-1. It'll solve all your problems. Meanwhile, by being in a diet, you are throwing another stressor at your system. So if the origin of the problem is exacerbated by stress, you're now turning up that stress dial. So I just had a conversation with a client yesterday about this, and she's great. She's been with us for a long time. But she's been experiencing some wacky hormonal type symptoms, and she wants to go into a deficit. And we had to have a really hard conversation about like, hey, I support you either way, but like you need to know the pros and cons of either of these choices. If we continue to nourish and continue to keep intensity a little bit lower, recovery a little bit higher for now, we're working on these symptoms and they have been improving over the last several months. If we shift into a diet phase right now when your body's not fully ready because you're still having some of these symptoms, your symptoms may get worse. We may be making the issue worse by cutting calories. And again, a lot of times very well-intentioned providers will say, well, eat whole foods, but it doesn't matter how many calories. And then women end up accidentally under eating, fueling the stress response in their body, or just being given the guidance of, it doesn't matter, just exercise more. Some of these people don't need more intensity in their life. A lot of times the people dealing with these issues are already overly chronically stressed. What type of exercise are we doing? Because if you tell somebody to go exercise and then they run 5 days a week, we're adding now another dump into their adrenal system and their cortisol and like all these things, right? So the type of inputs in terms of exercise and nutrition are things that we take into account because we're trying to look whole person, not just at these labs.
Yeah, and I think that's a great segue into this next point is that true root cause health work, whatever it is not complete or true until it is lived experience, right? So to Jess's point, these practitioners might ultimately give you a great checklist of things that you should do, right? You should do this, you should eat this way, you should cut this out, you should add this in. But at the end of the day, you have to adopt a certain way of living your life to prevent ending up in the same place that you were, right? We have to, the word embody feels a little bit fluffy, but it's really true, right? Like you have to be a different person, really. You have to live a different way. And so many women come to us. It's not like you come to me and say, I need help. I don't feel good, but I have 3 hours a day to contribute to this process of change. It's going to feel like you don't have a single minute in your life to go to the gym more than you already do or meal prep on Sundays, right? Which is why it's really important to have the right expectation that this healing work takes time. I do not expect you to become a different person in 90 days, right? And women that you see that wake up one day and they are just sick and tired of being sick and tired, and all of a sudden they do these things and make these changes, they got their blinders on. They're living in straight delusion, and that's great. They're like, I accept nothing else. Not everyone can adopt changes in that manner. Sometimes they feel a lot of defeat and it feels really hard, or like, is this worth my time, or what's the point, right? And they normalize the horrible way that they feel. So you have to know that it takes time, and you don't have to make overnight changes, but you have to understand that because this is this big tangled web, we have to undo old behaviors that don't serve you, old beliefs that don't serve you, old habits die hard, right? It's literally a cliche saying. Like, we have to look at all of those things that drove you to dysfunction to make that change ultimately. So many women define themselves as being very health aware or being very in tune with their body. Awareness is not actually making a change, right? That's a great step, and I'm glad you have that awareness, and we can skip over the part where I give you that eye-opening moment. But now you have to actually make the changes. You've got the data, you've done the research, you're like, I've read all these books, I know all these things. You can know 10 times more than me. But if you're not adopting changes, it doesn't matter, right? You have to actually implement. And then I really want to hit home this last piece, that root cause health is so individual, truly.
Especially, I've had clients who in our group chat see that other clients are doing something and say, oh, what are you taking for your killer, for your gut protocol? Because I want to do a gut protocol. And it's like, whoa. Every single person's protocol and plan that we come up with is so individual. Even if they are just a physique client, to be honest with you, somebody might come to us and be a couch potato and they just need to move more. Somebody else is way overtraining and needs to rest. We're not going to give those two people the same guidance. But when it comes to like weight gain, right? One might be underfueled, over stress adapted. They're dealing with metabolic suppression. The other person might be dealing with insulin resistance and blood sugar deregulation from being really sedentary and overeating. Bloating, right? I see a lot of ads. I see a lot of MLMs pushing gut support and hormone support. And it's like, take this probiotic. Okay, but like, what if you already have too much of that bacteria in your gut and now you're just adding to it? That could cause bloating, adding too much of a good thing, right? Or maybe you don't have enough of it and you need that specific probiotic, right? So those are...
Or maybe the lack of a bacterial strain has absolutely nothing to do with the reason that you're bloating. And I agree with you. Seeing these MLM girls talk about hormone balancing, I'm like, oh, here we go.
Like what we do and what you do are not the same.
Yes.
Yeah, it's so frustrating. To women with fatigue, right? I have a woman who is overly fatigued because she works her butt off and she is like... She's an A+ student who does literally everything to a T that I ever recommend. And I'm like, hey, dude, slow down. Let's take a rest week, please. Yeah. And that's what you need. And she was like, oh my gosh, I'm so tired. And I'm like, yeah, because you finally like took a breath and your body is catching up to you. Somebody else who is fatigued might have iron issues. Maybe they have poor thyroid conversion. Maybe they are nutrient deficient because they've been on a GLP-1 for 2 years and they just need to freaking eat, right? Like all of these reasons might be different, which is why it's so important that there's not the same strategy. Now, for everybody, I just want to reiterate, like back up what we've said in other episodes. For everybody, movement is good. Get more movement. Eating whole foods is good. Eating more protein is good. Getting rest is good, right? All of those things stand true across the board. But when it comes to specific protocols, everything needs to be individual. It can't be like a cookie cutter, one size fits all, or it's not going to be effective.
100%. So I think that, we went over a couple of different things, but ultimately I feel like this will kind of sum this episode up. So again, root cause has become very overused and misunderstood, I think. And chasing symptoms is not the problem. So I'm going to say a couple of sentences that I think will just summarize this and really hit it home. And I think really give some clarity. So the most important thing to understand is that your body adapts and it will always reflect the environment that it is in. You have to make a change to that to make a change to how you feel. And
it takes time. It takes time for your body to adapt also.
To recognize the changes and then adapt to them. Yeah. Being aware of the problem is not the same as actually implementing and making a change. One marker, one test, one symptom are just the check engine light. They are not actually the problem. And what I really want to hit home is that a protocol is not a lifestyle. You can temporarily go Mediterranean, anti-inflammatory, take all the supplements, clear up your gut, but you can have SIBO again in 90 days if you didn't actually make a change. Yeah.
Again, we are not anti-protocol. We do protocols like this, but both are so important in terms of maintaining outcomes.
Right. We have to have both. And that's why we have shifted into functional and physique and lifestyle and behavioral and all of these different components. So, and I love that you really want to make a change and you really want to feel better, but your body doesn't respond to what you want to do in your head. The body responds to what input you actually give it, right? So those are two very different things. So until you actually live the change and change your inputs and your behaviors and your nutrition and your lifestyle based on whatever data we collect and whatever protocols we implement, that's what makes it a forever thing, which is why coaching alongside of protocols is so incredibly important and powerful. And again, labs are just really expensive information at the end of the day if you don't do anything to actually change it. And then you hear this in my content a lot. The sequence and the order in which we address these things is very individual and very important to you actually getting the most out of the process and the protocol that you're working through.
I think you guys are going to love it. Me and Jill just talked about this before we started this episode. We are going to be doing a series soon on pattern recognition in labs. So I feel like a lot of you guys come to us and you're like, but what does this mean? And it's like, I don't have time to look at your entire lifestyle, right? But we want to break down for you guys over the next few weeks. I think next week we already have another episode scheduled, but within the next month, we're going to be breaking down for you like, okay, what does your thyroid labs mean, right? Beyond just, oh yeah, your TSH is normal. Okay, what patterns do we look for in blood work on somebody who has PCOS? So we're going to kind of break that down for you guys. And I think you guys will really enjoy that series because then you can pull up your own labs and listen while you're doing it. And we can hopefully educate you guys as we go to some of the back end of how our brains work and what we do when we're working with clients.
So hopefully that really hits home what true root cause health and work actually means. Again, our job is always to arm you with information, help you discern what information applies to you and where you're at in your life. And really just at the end of the day to keep it simple and live simply and live beautifully and live with vitality. And that is our goal and our mission with every episode. So if you guys have any questions, you can always find us on social media, but hope that was helpful and see you guys in the next episode.